It is Mock Draft Monday, first post-season mock draft. Not that it really prevented us from doing mock drafts every single week of the season. Mike Renner's new mock has Cam Ward, number 1 to the Titans, and Shedeur Sanders falling to number 6 and the Vegas Raiders. Let's bring in Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson, who are full steam ahead to the draft, which is a month and a half away. Mike, we'll start with that number 1 pick of Cam Ward to the Titans. Are you buying those whispers that the Titans might be interested in moving out of that number 1 slot?
I'm not personally. I think when you have obviously a new GM in place and a head coach that desperately needs their quarterback, and with the way Will Levis looked last year, I'm taking a guy in Cam Ward, who is obviously a wild card, obviously a big unknown, but his upside looks massive from what we've seen on tape. And that's what you're buying into if you want the number 1 overall pick. You don't want a guy who's just going to be an average starter for you. You want a guy who's a franchise-type quarterback. And I think Cam Ward has shown enough at this point to be that. It's like, yeah, they have other holes too, and yeah, they need to put a lot of pieces around him. But a great quarterback, as we saw in Washington, can cover up a lot of ills on your roster. So to me, I think they'd be crazy to trade out of it, but obviously crazier things have happened.
Yeah, for sure. 73 days until the actual draft, so you understand why there might be smokescreen season starting since the NFL season is over in terms of what the Titans want to do. But I think Mike's point is an important one. You ain't going to win without a quarterback. And the one that's currently in the roster isn't helping them win football games, and you can blame whoever you want. But that's not the guy Brian Callahan drafted because he wasn't there yet. And obviously the new GM didn't draft him because he just arrived. So I think you can never have enough quarterbacks on the roster, and you keep drafting them or signing them until you get the right one. So I'm taking Cam Ward here. Maybe it's a little early, and then you're going to figure it out later, because if you don't have the quarterback, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how many Hall of Famers you have on the roster, because unless the guy taking the snaps is able to do the things you want him to do, you're not going to win a lot of football games.
Another team that also needs a quarterback, because it doesn't look like Deshaun Watson is going to be returning anytime soon. That's the Browns. But then, of course, last week we hear from Myles Garrett at the beginning of last week that he would like a trade. So a lot of important positions to address there. Who are you going with the Browns, Mike?
I'm going with Abdul, the Penn State defensive end. One, because obviously the Myles Garrett, if they do trade him, and I fully expect them to trade him, it's going to be a big need on that roster. He's got big shoes to fill. Myles Garrett's probably the best pure pass rusher in the NFL. And truthfully, Abdul, with what we put on tape this year, he might be the best pure pass rushing prospect since Myles Garrett. Now, that's obviously just as a pure pass rusher, but you watch this guy and his explosiveness, this combination of bend explosiveness, and then that just unique ability to get skinny and get back to quarterbacks. To think about, this was his first year actually rushing the passer full-time at Penn State. To see what the arrow could be for this guy, I'm not passing on him at number 2 for one of the quarterbacks after Cam Ward. I just have that big a gap between Cam Ward and QB2. So at that point, I'm getting a guy in Abdul to replace Myles Garrett.
Yeah, we're in number 11 also conjures up memories of Micah Parsons, which helps. I think no quarterback here makes sense as well. I'm a little partial to Mason Graham, who's going to be in the mix as a top 5 guy here, but I get Abdul Carter. Might also think about just trading this pick down if you're going to trade Myles Garrett, get as many picks as possible, and just start over if you're the Cleveland Browns.
Let's jump down the board a bit to the Jags at 5. And look, they hit it out of the park with their first-round pick last year at the end of the first round with Brian Thomas, made the Pro Bowl his rookie season. Why, Mike, are you going with another wide receiver here at 5 in Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona?
Well, one's Liam Cohen, and that offense obviously featured 2 wide receivers really well when Chris Godwin was healthy last year. And 2, this is the type of wide receiver they've never given Trevor Lawrence. You go back to his days at Clemson, he had big-bodied guys and the likes like T. Higgins who could make plays on the sideline because Trevor Lawrence isn't the most accurate. He's a good decision maker, but sometimes he errs left and right, high, whatnot. If you air left, right, and high to Tetairoa McMillan, he's still coming down with it. This guy's catch radius is the biggest in the draft class, one of the biggest in recent memory. That's the kind of guy I want to pair with Trevor Lawrence, given his skill set. You give me a Brian Thomas Jr. to take the top off defense, Tet McMillan to do the underneath stuff, and all of a sudden you have what Trevor Lawrence has never had, and that's a high-level supporting cast in Jacksonville.
Do not hate it. And especially since they re-up Walker Little, the offensive line issues are less of a concern especially at this point in the draft. And Tetairoa McMillan has been wide receiver 1 for me since the summer, and that hasn't changed. They had some rough sledding in Tucson this year, but it wasn't because of Tet. And I think him going to Jacksonville, where he doesn't have to be the number 1 right away. And we saw what happened with Brian Thomas Jr. If you put them in position to have success, they can have success. Just don't put too much on their plates. And I love the idea of helping Trevor Lawrence out. And maybe we won't know about his accuracy issues because, to Mike's point, Tet McMillan's catch radius is so big, everything's going to look like he threw it right to him anyway.
Let's go to number 6, and that's where we find the Raiders. And things are getting a little interesting here because for a long time we saw Shedeur Sanders likely the number 1 overall pick and a quarterback at that, and now he is falling down those draft boards. So, Ryan, 2 questions to you. One, what do you feel about this, him being paired with the Raiders? It's like Super Bowl Monday. Like, we need these days off, by the way. My brain's still not working.
It should be a holiday.
Also, Ryan, why is he starting to fall?
Yeah, it's definitely Super Bowl Monday. I've been mumbling my words, what feels like for quite a time now. But here's the thing, and Mike can talk about this as well, but this is all us in the media having conversations about where we think these guys should go. We're not even at the combine yet, and teams will start to get serious about where they start slotting these quarterbacks and other players once we get through the combine. The interview process is a big part of this, and then the 30 visits, so on and so forth. But I think in terms of the fit, we know the Tom Brady connection. We know that the Raiders desperately need a quarterback. They weren't able to get one of the top 6 quarterbacks a year ago and had to settle, quote-unquote, for Brock Bowers. And I think, again, just like we talked about with Cam Ward, you got to have a quarterback. And I think Shedeur Sanders is worthy of a top 10 pick. We'll see about any off-field concerns in terms of not him being a bad kid necessarily, but all the hype that comes along with drafting a Sanders into your organization. But I like the idea of him going there. I think Tom Brady would be a good influence on him, and I think Pete Carroll would as well. And, by the way, the Raiders desperately need to get a quarterback.
Yeah, to me, this is just 1, my eval, and 2, some of the other evals of people I trust at the quarterback position. And if a lot of people are saying that Shedeur is not a top-of-the-draft quarterback that I trust, someone may believe that. Someone may fall in love. But if a lot of people are saying it, well, then maybe not everyone at the top of the draft is believing it, especially when probably the only 2 teams ahead of them that would really go for a quarterback, the Browns, the Giants, well, they have pretty darn good prospects there in Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, to my opinion, 2 guys who aren't like year-on-year their prospects, like guys who are special for this class. So I think those teams could look elsewhere, and if that's the case, Shedeur could fall to the next quarterback-needy team, being the Las Vegas Raiders.
Sometimes it's about where you have a guy on your big board, just the overall talent, the ceiling. Other times it's about the fit, and I think that's where Mike went with the Panthers at 8, taking Georgia edge Jalon Walker. Why do you think that he would be a perfect fit in that defense?
Yeah, Jiro Evero, he drops his defensive ends. He had Jadeveon Clowney, who's really like a pure 4-3 defensive end. He had him dropping like 50 times this last year. So he wants to have that versatility to have those guys drop into coverage. And there is no one better in this draft class in such a role than Jalon Walker. Just over 240 pounds. He played off-ball linebacker and edge for Georgia this past fall and over the course of his career. And truthfully, he may be the best pass rusher in this draft class after Abdul Carter and the best inside linebacker in this draft class. So that's a pretty good combo if you're the Carolina Panthers and you have such a role. So I think that's why they are uniquely situated to draft a guy like him.
No, that's right. 2 for 1, and you're getting really good 2 position value when you talk about what Jalon Walker brings to the field. And it's funny, coming into the season, we were talking a lot about Mikael Williams, who's going to get drafted probably in the first round. But Jalon Walker outshone him, in part because he was healthy, but in part because he outplayed him throughout the season, and he was doing it all over the field. So I love the idea of him going to Carolina and then taking advantage of that versatility.
Guys, hang on just a second here. We're going to go through some teams that we saw play a little football last night and what they need to do in the draft as well. We're talking about the Eagles and the Chiefs, of course. Really, for the Chiefs, some big decisions to be made, what they do in the first round as well. We're also going to talk about the Eagles. That is just on the other side of this break.
A lot of writing. Great. I think earlier in the show I said we're only a month and a half to the draft. I think my math's bad, too.
Oh, I was going to ask you, you seemed very perky today. Did you watch the end of the game, or did you go to sleep early?
No, I stayed till the very end, till the bitter end, because someone took Liveline Chiefs plus 20.5.
You?
No, but someone very close to me did. This is Mike Renner's
Your
mock
dog.
draft. We talked about his top 10. We're going to get deeper into this thing, including Chiefs and Eagles in just a bit. We're going to start in the teens, though. Right after you saw the Cowboys taking Ashton Genty, Mike, you have the Dolphins going with a wide receiver, Luther Burden, out of Missouri. Is that because you see him as a potential Tyreek Hill replacement?
100%. And I think in this draft class, there's not a lot of guys with pure juice. There's not a lot of guys who Mike McDaniels would love, in that offense because of that. But Luther Burden's one. And I think uniquely he's situated to play in that offense because he can take some hits. He plays over the middle of the field. He plays really strong, has very good hands. You see it right there. I mean, the guy is way more physical than anyone they have on that Dolphins roster. And Tua, to his credit, he's very accurate, but he's known to throw some hospital balls, man. So Luther Burden, they need a bigger type of wide receiver that can go over the middle of the football field there. He is perfect for what they do offensively.
Pretty disrespectful of Mike not to take Tyreek Hill's words of apology seriously when he said the other day that he was sorry for the things he said about Tua and the Dolphins. But look, this is a great pick, and I love the idea, whether Tyreek's there or not, of Luther Burden coming in and helping that offense. You can never have enough speed in Mike McDaniel's offense, and that's exactly what Luther Burden provides. It was hard to tell at times last year because Brady Cook was banged up for much of the season what Luther Burden actually is capable of. 2023 is a good indication, and I think in this offense in Miami, it'll be a lot like 2023 was for him for the Tigers.
Offense for the Dolphins. We're going to go to the Steelers next at 21, looking at the defense here. And Mike, you lack a corner out of the University of Texas. Who is it?
Jahdae Brown, the guy who's a fifth year. He was a slot corner pretty much his entire career until this past fall. Played on the outside, and he played with that physicality you expect from a slot cornerback on the outside. I'm very curious to hear Ryan's take on this because this, to me, is a massive need for them. Their corners were not up to snuff a year ago. Big reason why that defensive line's so dominant, but the defense as a whole, not that good down the stretch. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Ryan.
Love it, Mike. In fact, this is one of the guys that I liked back in October, November, and I think I had him mocked to the Steelers back then, and you feel a little weird about it because a lot of people weren't talking about Jahdae Brown, and you watch him and you go, okay, is this guy legit? He's legit, and Mike laid out the reasons why, and I love his versatility. I love the edge with which he plays. He reminded me a lot in terms of his versatility of what Brian Branch did coming out of Alabama. Not the same type of player, but he's always around the ball. And I even like this pick over the fact that Malachi Starks was still on the board in Mike's mock draft. That's how much I love Jahdae Brown, and so I give this a 2 thumbs up and 2 A+.
I wonder what Bills fans were thinking watching the Super Bowl last night. Like, I mean, we couldn't beat this Chiefs team. We can't beat this Chiefs team that the Eagles are pounding. When are we ever going to get it done? Mike, what do you have the Bills doing with their pick at 30?
I have them going with South Carolina safety Nick Emmanwori. They just need to get more physical on the defense side of the ball. Kind of the same thing that the Eagles did to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That's kind of like what the Chiefs did to the Bills defense. I mean, they just out-physicaled them, and they just need to get stronger at every single level. I think Emmanwori is a guy who uniquely at the safety position at 227 pounds can be an enforcer at that position. He's not quite Kyle Hamilton, but he can do some of those things where he can play in the box and be a legit value add in that regard as well. So I think it's just a position that they kind of was an afterthought for them this year. I think they need an upgrade at, and I think he would be just that.
All right, let's go to the Chiefs then at 31. There's 2 things we saw from Patrick Mahomes yesterday. It was this, just running around, or it was this. And he'd been sacked like 6 times, the most in his career. You're going with some O-line help. Mike, who do you like here for the Chiefs at 31?
I have them going Josh Simmons, the Ohio State offensive tackle. He's a guy, had he not had a patellar tear midseason against Oregon, then he'd probably be mocked a lot higher in this. And if he gets a full bill of health by the time of the draft, he may very well go higher in this, but it is a bad injury, and he may not have that. And because of that, he may slip. But he's a guy who, if he comes back next season, fully healthy, he's as NFL ready as it gets in this draft class. The guy's played a ton of football between San Diego State and Ohio State, and this isn't a project like a Wanya Morris or Kingsley Suamataia. One of those guys can kick into guard to fill the shoes of Trey Smith, and he could be a plug-and-play day-one starter at left tackle again if he's healthy.
Yep, health is the only concern because he was starting to get red hot. San Diego State transfer, got hurt in that Oregon game, so we didn't get a lot of tape of him against top-flight competition against those Power 4 schools. But if you don't rush him and he gets healthy and he's not the project like the previous draft picks that Mike talked about is, you're in pretty good shape. A lot of ifs, but my goodness, that looked like they were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl last night for the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes was running for his life. So you have to find solutions, and that means taking someone like Josh Simmons, should he be there, which would feel like a steal because, as Mike noted, if he's healthy, he would probably go top half of the first round.
What about the receiver position or just a pass catcher? Because we don't know what Travis Kelce is going to do, if he's going to retire, if he's not. And even then, I don't even know how many targets he had by the end of the night. I think the last I checked was like 3. Maybe it ended up being 4. Who knows? Mike, do you think they look to the draft or maybe free agency to try to fill a position there and get him some help, Patrick Mahomes?
Well, we'll see if Travis Kelce retires. If he comes back, I doubt they drafted tight end. They just drafted Jared Wiley in the 4th round last year. And they're really banking on Rashee Rice, right? His injury, had he been healthy, I think that's a different Chiefs offense down the stretch. So Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, it would surprise me if they really invested a ton of resources at the receiver position with that core. I think they're looking trenches. I know at the back end of this first round, that's where the value is going to be, and that's where they're all of a sudden starting to get thin on both sides of the ball.
You look over on the other side, and it seemed like the Eagles didn't have any holes in their roster, but teams change year over year. You've got Brandon Graham might retire, Josh Sweat going to hit free agency. So, Mike, what do you have the Eagles doing here with the last pick in the first round?
Yeah, I have them going business as usual. Nic Scourton, defensive end, Texas A&M, a guy who, if you were doing any of the preseason way too early mocks, this guy was a top 10 pick in pretty much all of them. After he transferred from Purdue, though, to Texas A&M, had a disappointing year, looked a little out of shape this year, unfortunately, just didn't have the same production. But seemingly every one of those guys that ends up going to the Eagles ends up figuring it out, ends up getting back in shape, and ends up dominating. So he could fall all the way to the back end of the first round. But if he does, the rest of the NFL should be very, very upset that he does, because got to be like when Nolan Smith did it a couple years ago. The guy's probably going to be making plays in the Super Bowl in a couple years' time.
Yeah, Nolan Smith is a great example of someone, you can judge him if you want after one season, but give him a little time to get up to speed and then see how that thing works out, because Howie Roseman has been hitting grand slam after grand slam in that post-Jalen Reagor trade, and I like the idea of Nic Scourton going here as well. One name I'll mention, just to mix things up, we know about Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. I wouldn't hate Matthew Golden out of Texas, the wide receiver, perhaps getting drafted here. They need help there as well. But again, defense seems to be their MO, especially in the first round. I would get it, and I think Nic Scourton's best football is ahead of him based on what we saw glimpses of at Purdue and then early on this season at Texas A&M.
All right, Ryan Wilson and Mike Renner with us. You can hear them on Wednesdays with the First Pick podcast.
Not even going to say Wednesday?
Wednesdays? We're doing a new one because Rick Spielman's gone. See ya.
He
Ryan
apparently had to get
chased him out of
big
town.
boy job again.
Yeah, right back to the NFL goes Rick Spielman. So Ryan's going to have Mike Renner on Wednesday's show, the first post-Super Bowl pod on With the First Pick.